It's a joy to be here tonight, and it was great seeing Stephen and Lynn. And we bumped into each other in some extraordinary places. He was turning up to speak at an event in Reading, and he walked in and he saw me there, and he looked really puzzled. And I just had to explain that I don't live in London all of the time. I actually get out and about a little bit. And it's interesting, and it's just a joy to see the councillors here tonight. It's great that you're here. I was just thinking about an event I did in Plymouth a little while back. I was invited to speak to the church leaders in Plymouth, and I'd prepared to speak from Acts chapter 20, which is quite an interesting passage because it talks about how Paul had a big influence on transforming a city called Ephesus many years ago. And I thought that would be great to talk to the church leaders about that in Plymouth. But before I spoke to the church leaders, they put on a civic reception for me. So I had to go to the Lord Mayor's parlour for tea and meet all the councillors and so on. It was a great event. And when I was chatting with the councillors, I discovered that Plymouth had a 2020 vision. And I came back thinking, maybe I need to just trim down my message. Instead of speaking on the whole of Acts 20, why don't I just look at Acts 20, verse 20? And in that, it says, this was Paul's words in that chapter, I kept back nothing that was helpful. So I said to the church leaders in Plymouth, look, your city is having this 2020 vision. Why don't you have a 2020 vision and go to the city leaders and say, we, the churches in Plymouth, will hold back nothing that is helpful in terms of fulfilling that vision in the city. So that's exactly what they did. 2 years later, they're still meeting with the councillors and the leaders in the city, working through that particular thing. They've just done an audit where they've looked at how the church now is providing the majority of a lot of the services in the city, which has been brilliant. Well, I shared that little story when I was speaking to a group of church leaders from Africa. And these were people that have been spread throughout the whole world, really, and were trying to focus back into Africa, how they could do mission back into Africa. And I was really excited about this because I heard they were coming from all around the world, and I hadn't been told where we were going to meet. So I thought this could be great, you know, it'd be a trip to Malawi or somewhere like that. Turned out to be Bexley Heath, which was a big disappointment, really, because it's 10 minutes from where I live. But what was interesting is I just mentioned that little story in that meeting. Someone said, did you know the president of Nigeria had declared a 2020 vision? And I had to admit, I didn't really know that. This was the late president of Nigeria. And then they said, would you come and speak about Acts 2020 in Nigeria? And they invited me out to this conference center that seats 1 million. I mean, when they take up the offering in this conference center, they have to use golf buggies so they can bring it from the back to the front. I mean, it's extraordinary, really. But I didn't get to speak in the main building. They put me in the youth hall. That only holds about 5,000. But it was just incredible just to be able to share that 2020 vision. And then, quite extraordinarily, I felt God challenge me and say, what's your 2020 vision? And I thought, well, I haven't really got one. I mean, 10 years' time, it's going to be 2020. What's my 2020 vision? And I went back to that verse in Acts 2020. And after it says, I hold back nothing that's helpful, it goes on and says, teaching from house to house. And I thought, well, I don't do that, really. I sort of flit from nation to nation rather than house to house and city to city. And then I thought of something. I thought, you know, every time I go into Africa at the moment, there's been a technological leap. And it's not just Africa. I remember when you couldn't make a phone call to anyone in Pakistan because no one in Pakistan had a phone. And then suddenly everyone had got a mobile. There was a leap. No landlines. They all just got mobiles. We went to Tanzania recently, and we took some CDs with us to encourage the church leaders there. They said, oh, don't do CDs in Tanzania. We've all got DVD players. So I thought, oh, yeah. And now I'm discovering that people who don't have televisions are actually watching television on the internet. And I was just thinking, you know, just about everybody's getting access now online. So I thought, well, actually, I can teach house to house, can't I? Because I can take all of the things that I've done over the years when we were putting stuff out on God TV and so on, and we can put it online. And so I'm beginning to get a 2020 vision now. So everywhere I go around the world, I say to people, hey, if you'd like to give me your email address, I will make sure that you can get resources online. And I'm just mentioning that because it just could be that some of you, if you gave me your email address, we could get resources to you, which would be great. But more than that, you could be praying for all of these other people in other parts of the world who are also getting these resources. I've got a vision to double year on year getting material into Africa and Asia, which should mean that by the year 2020, if we double year on year, that'll be 2 million people. Trevor who works with me, is really concerned about the year 2019. He says, because that means we've got to put 1 million names into the database that year. So we'll need some help with that. But this is just something that is about making an impact. And when I think about this church making an impact, it really excites me. By the way, Trevor, just give me those little bits and pieces. I just want to say this, because in a moment we're going to get a chance to have some refreshments, and you can look at the food bank stand. But I brought a few of those things that you can get online, but you can actually get some of them tonight. There's a little book there called Fulfilling Your Ministry, and there's some CDs, DVDs. Have a look at that when you're out there having something to eat. But I want to share something with you for what I believe God's saying to this church right now as you're talking about a new season. 2 years in. 2 years. I mean, 2 years out of how many is that going to be? How many years is City Chapel going to be here? 2 years out of 20? 2 years out of 40? We just don't know, do we really? But it's a beginning, isn't it? And one of the things I'm sure of, as you're entering a new season now, it won't be the only new season you enter. Because as the years unfold, there are going to be more and more things that God is going to lead you into. In some ways, I feel that you've, perhaps in these first 2 years, laid a foundation. Well, then you have to build on the foundation. And it takes time to build on that foundation, doesn't it? But what you lay in the foundation determines the shape of what the building is going to be. So some of the things that you've already put in place as a church, I'm sure are going to be characteristics of this church for many years to come. That heart for the community, that desire to touch people's lives, that willingness to go out on the street, that emphasis, bring as many young people in as possible. Make sure the church is relevant. Get the children up on the platform. Let's be a family church. Let's have a big open heart which says, look, the principle here is not you behave first, and if you behave really well, we might tick the box that say you obviously believe. And then once you've proved that you behave and believe, we might let you belong. I love the fact that it's the other way around. Just come and belong, and then you can believe. And if you believe properly, well, then you'll behave, because God changes your life. Some of us get it all the wrong way around. We think that, I'm having this conversation with my youngest son at the moment. And we've been having this conversation for years, ever since we adopted him when he was 4. We've got 2 older children, and we adopted Paul. And when the social services were interviewing, they put you through the grill if you're going to adopt. Just as well, really, because they don't want you to reject someone who's already been rejected. So they really want to make sure that you're going to hang on in there. And one of the things they told us actually was that when Paul comes to live with you, they said, he's been rejected so many times in his life that he's going to expect you to reject him. So just be prepared for that. Well, I remember the first time he really, really tested me out. We were in my study, and he really lost it. He was throwing things around everywhere. And then I remembered what they told me from social services, that he was just trying to see if we would reject him. So I said to him, Paul, I just want to tell you, no matter what you do, we won't send you away. And do you know what he said to me? I know you won't, but I really wish you would. It really caught me out. But it was just a way of him demonstrating, some of the problems that he'd been through. But social services said to me, if we put a child in your home, will you expect that child to share your faith? And I said, no. And they were quite amazed. They said, but you're a pastor. I said, no, I don't expect him to share my faith. I expect him to have his own faith. And I expect him to get there in his own time, in his own way. I didn't realize it would take him quite so long, but hey, he's getting there. But we were having this conversation the other day, and he was saying to me, Dad, I know I will get my life sorted out with God. But I don't want to come to God to sort me out. I want to come to God when I'm sorted out.